This may shock you, but I don't buy physical books. Hi, I'm Mike the Tired Book Dad, and welcome to my new BookTube channel. So why did I want to start this channel? Well, the first is that I've been reading novels since I was 9, and I have at this point definitely forgotten way more books than I remember. And I've never been a big note taker or review writer on websites like Goodreads or Amazon, so I don't have a good log of what I've read, what I've liked, what I didn't like, and why. I can yap about books forever, and I thought that, okay, well, let's just try the video format, and maybe that'll be an interesting way for me to be able to express in long form what I feel about books that I have read and enjoyed. Reason number 2 is I don't really have any fantasy reading friends these days. Back in middle school and high school, when I was really deep in reading as a child, I did have friends and we were reading similar books. Yeah, you know, all that is to say is that I want to connect with other people who share my same passion and are as excited to talk about the books that they like and enjoy as I am. So the BookTube community is really a big thing that I'm excited to explore. Now the third reason, and this is a big one for me, is I've wanted to write a novel since I was a kid. I remember back in elementary school, I was already writing fan fiction about some of my favorite characters from the books I was reading at the time, which I will get into in a moment. And so it's always been something I've aspired to since I was a child. I've made a couple attempts. I, managed to successfully complete a National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, a while back, but I have never actually started and finished a full novel, from soup to nuts. And that's something else that I want to change in 2026. So I'm currently planning a cozy fantasy novel, and I'll be happy to tell you more about that in future videos. I'm really excited about the progress I've made already in terms of actually doing the world building. I'm making a map, drawing a map by hand, so it's my first ever world map, and I'm hand drawing it, and that process has been really fun and exciting. So I have a lot more to share in that direction. And so, I want this channel to be a place for me to kind of build in public, so to speak, or write in public. So that way I can attract other like-minded folks who enjoy what I'm working on, might be interested in reading, share feedback, gather beta readers, and all that type of thing. So that's the third reason why I wanted to start this channel. What are some unique things about me that I have to offer? Well, first is that I live in Tokyo. And so what that means is I have some exposure to a whole new set of authors that we don't really hear about much in the West, and that is, of course, Japanese authors. Now, my Japanese is not good enough to read books. Oftentimes my Japanese is not good enough to, have a basic conversation, but I am trying to explore more authors from this part of the world. What I have noticed so far when I've gone to the bookstores like Tsutaya or Kinokuniya is, as you might expect, not a ton of Japanese authors have their novels localized into English. So of course the English selection is limited, but certainly there are, there's more available here than there would be overseas. But that's the first thing. The second thing is that the Japanese seem to really, or at least the novels that get localized, are heavily skewed towards crime, like mystery crime thrillers, kind of detective style crime, and horror. And so, these are two genres that I really haven't read in very much. I don't think I'll ever be exploring that horror genre. I don't read to get scared, I read to escape. I think the real world is scary enough without adding on top of it. But I think, the crime detective side of it is something I might be interested to dig into a little bit more. So that is something unique I think that I have to bring, is hopefully as I am starting to dig into a new set of authors over here in Japan, I can introduce them to the world and help these authors find a new audience overseas, which I think would bring me great joy. Thing number 2, as I mentioned, I'm old. I'm turning 40 next year, and I've been reading for over 3 decades now. And so I've seen a lot of changes in the genre. I've read quite broadly, and now even though I can't remember half of what I've read, I have read those books. Most of the major epic series that you could think of, including the Malazan Book of the Fallen. But I've seen a lot of evolutions and changes in the genre over time. I've read quite broadly across the spectrum of books. And so, I think that again, even though I'm not like a meticulous note planner and I can't reference this or that and, oh, this is really, you know, true to this person's style, but I have like a very well-developed sense of taste. I know what I like, and I can speak about it when I'm talking about it. And lastly, I don't really read on trend much. You know, I certainly do pick up some of the exciting new releases, but I tend to just follow my own interest and look for things that are similar to books that I have read and enjoyed, and not so much what other people think that I should read. Of course, I'm, you know, browsing bookish communities online to get inspiration for things that I haven't been able to uncover myself and pull up and read. But really, I'm a pretty self-directed reader. I tend to know what I like and mainly just explore my own interests. Hopefully I'll bring some books forward that, you know, some folks haven't really heard of or considered before. What am I most excited for? As I said, I am most excited about having a creative outlet. I actually like making videos. I shockingly enjoy the editing process. I view editing as its own kind of creative endeavor, and I, as a tech nerd, I do enjoy learning how to use the tools well, but videos are actually their own form of creative fun for me. And so I'm certainly interested to explore that further. But also, you know, as I said previously, that I'm really mainly just excited about making new friends, making connections, and just creating opportunities to better know more awesome people in the space. And then, you know, of course, I'm also excited as I work through the process of my cozy fantasy novel and getting that into the world. You know, that's going to be a whole journey in and of itself. And so having people to go through that together with, because writing is a very lonely pursuit, and I don't have any writer friends here in Tokyo as of yet. If you're in the area, hit me up. Although I have 2 small kids, so, you know, I may not be able to get out much. But that's another piece that I'm excited about too. Why do I love reading? Well, honestly, as I mentioned at the top of the video, I'm an escapist. I want to go into somewhere that's totally brand new. I want to meet the people, learn about the world, explore its quirks and its intricacies and what makes it, you know, interesting, new, and exciting. And ultimately, that's what I'm about. I just want to get swept up in a story, taken off to a new realm, and just live there for a little while. Give myself a reprieve from just slogging through the daily life that we all have to go through together on this planet that we call Earth. When did I start reading? Well, technically I started reading when I was maybe 3 years old. My mother was very dedicated to teaching my brother and I to learn how to read, and she inculcated a love of books in us the same way that she loved books, and she still reads very actively. The first book I ever read was Sammy the Seal. I remember it was very exciting when I managed to sound out my first word all by myself. Grabbed a book and I ran downstairs and excitedly told my parents that I had just read my first word. And that was what got me started. But all through elementary school, I was a reader. Books like Goosebumps, The Boxcar Boys, a lot of those kinds of books that you would get through the Scholastic reading program back in the good old days. But my first novel was The Hobbit. Picked it up on just pure chance in the library in 4th grade, and you know, that was what really hooked me into the world of fantasy. And of course, Redwall was another big part of my entry into fantasy. I had some friends that were reading Redwall at the time, and we used to love just every time a new book would drop, we'd all get it together and get excited about it. The lush and rich tapestry of the Redwall world was also a big part of just showing me what was possible. That's what really hooked me in, and then I discovered Dragonlance, the War of the Lance trilogy, and it was just like, I was gone from there. It was all downhill from there. I've been just a hopeless reader ever since then. What kind of books do I like to read? Perhaps it's easier to start by saying what kind of books I don't like to read. And to be perfectly honest, I don't love romantasy. To be perfectly honest, I think romantasy has made it harder for someone like me to find books that I enjoy reading. You know, the romantasy books, some of them, you know, it's right up there front and center. You know what you're getting into. It's like, this is a romantasy book, and I can say, okay, great, then I know it's not for me. But, you know, sometimes I get tricked, basically. Just going on Amazon or trying to read through my recommended books. Amazon doesn't really differentiate between romantasy and more of what I guess I might call traditional fantasy. And so it's made it harder in many ways for me to find books that I enjoy. That has been a trend that I certainly understand its popularity. I'm not here to knock it for anyone who likes it. I did try it with Fourth Wing because I love dragons, and we'll get to that in a second, but it's definitely not for me. Fourth Wing for sure showed me that like anything that is heavy on the spice is just, it's not gonna be for me. Even books like The Priory of the Orange Tree, which I did give a shot because again, dragons. Having romance be something that's a driving force for the story, even that doesn't really interest me so much. I'm not anti-romance in books. Again, I mentioned Dragonlance going way back to Tanis and Kitiara. Like, I like it when it's there. I like it when it creates complexity in relationships or drama between characters. But I don't want it to be a big part of what makes the book go. And for anything particularly spicy, I would rather that just stays behind closed doors. You know, you can use plenty of innuendo and insinuate what's going on. I'll get it, I'm an adult, and that's enough for me. But hey, you know, to each their own. Now, as for what I do like to read, as I mentioned, I am a sucker for dragons. Since Dragonlance was such a big part of my formative years as a reader, you know, I have continued to have just an avid love affair, a torrid love affair with dragons, even into my adulthood reading years. And especially back in those days, the cover art on books was so cool. I feel like just like the 90s era of book covers for novels really was a great era for dragons. I mentioned the War of the Lance. We had, of course, the Dragon Riders of Pern. I don't remember exactly when Aragon came out, but like Aragon, of course, that was the thing. Smog in The Hobbit. So dragons were a big part of what really got me excited as a kid. And dragons always just felt like fantasy to me, you know? So me coming up in an era where it was very high fantasy, elves and dwarves and dragons, you know, I still like that stuff. And magic too. Magic is a big part of what makes a book exciting to me. I'm not as much of like a diehard enthusiast for hard magic. I know Brandon Sanderson has really just like taken over the scene with his hard magic. I like a good hard magic system, and of course I loved reading the Mistborn series. The surge binding and all that stuff in you know, Sanderson's Stormlight Archives was always really interesting to me. Loved the shard plate and all that. I'm not, you know, married to the idea of having a hard magic system. I just want it to be interesting and used in a way that makes sense. So if it's gonna be soft magic, that's totally cool. It just needs to be used in a way that makes sense. I don't want any Deus Ex Machina. I don't want anything coming out of left field. Just make it make sense and make it cool, and then I'm happy with it. Where do I read? So primarily I read in bed. I have a small apartment here in Tokyo. I don't have a lot of extra space. This is my office that you're looking at behind me. It's not much to look at. I have, as I said, 2 small kids, including 1 toddler. And so I haven't really invested in making it like a super cozy kind of vibe, because again, mostly like I sort of work here and then we have the family out there. So haven't really done up, you know, a reading nook for myself or anything like that. But I don't really mind because I love reading in bed. So I'm certainly happy to lie down and read on my my trusty dusty Kindle. This thing is pretty old, and I'll tell a bit more about the story in a second. But mainly I'm reading in bed, and oftentimes at night before I sleep. Unless I'm reading some kind of book that just like has me so deeply in the grips that I just can't wait. I'm always trying to steal moments to do some more reading. Then, you know, I might be reading on the Kindle app on my phone, and I'll just read wherever I am. But for the most part, bedtime is reading time for me. What does my book collection look like? This may shock you, but I don't buy physical books. I know that like having a huge like shelves full of painted edge hardcover copies and all that is a big part of the aesthetic of bookish communities on social media. I know people love to be surrounded by books that they love and all that. I made a decision years ago that I didn't really care to buy physical copies of novels anymore. Main reason being is I'm not really a rereader type. There are certainly some books that I will go back and reread. I did a whole top to bottom reread of Wheel of Time a couple years ago. I'm thinking of rereading the Powder Mage trilogy by Brian McClellan sometime soon. That doesn't mean that I want to have a bunch of books that I have to haul around. In my life after graduating college, I've moved a number of times, including across the ocean, 3 times now? I used to live in China. I moved there and back a couple times, and now I live in Tokyo. So I just haven't wanted to accumulate a lot of stuff that I have to deal with as I'm moving around. And on top of that, I'm not really a collector archetype, with one big exception, which is tea. I'm a massive tea drinker, and if I had my way, I would just be completely surrounded by all types of teaware, cups, pots, kettles, you know, brewing and implements and things like that. And I do actually have a pretty solid collection in storage back in the States, but again, like now I left the States and that's just sitting in a storage locker in Texas. It's not doing me any good here. So I don't buy physical books. Instead, everything lives on here. As I said, this is my trusty dusty Kindle. I've had it, gosh, it's gotta be at least 10 years. I bought it when I lived in China. I bought this cover when I lived in China too. If you can't tell, it's had seen better days. So this Kindle has literally been, you know, there and back again with me, all over the place. It's almost as old as my relationship with my wife, and so, you know, this Kindle means a lot to me. Now, there's one exception, and that's when I get books like these. So if I have a work that I want to reference often, then I will usually get the physical book. That way I can just find pages, jump to it quickly. This may upset some people, but I do dog ear my book pages because I don't like all the tabs sort of sticking out, you know, like this, and I feel like they make a mess. So I do dog ear book pages, and I do write in the margins on my books. So, you know, if that's going to bother you, then you might want to exit now. Questions from my favorite booktubers. I really only have one big question, and that is, how do you keep the desire to make YouTube videos and be consistent with that from putting pressure on the reading and sucking the joy out of that activity? Because I'll tell you, my biggest fear is that doing a YouTube channel is going to make me feel obligated to read in order to upload videos, and as soon as that happens, then I just know from experience that my love of reading that light will be extinguished. That's what I would really love to know. How do you balance bookish content with protecting the passion and love that you have for reading? Challenges to overcome. I think I've got two challenges to overcome. The first is what I just mentioned, which is balancing the desire to be consistent with my uploads on this channel with not destroying my love for the thing that I am actually making videos about. So I want to keep my reading sacred, and to a certain extent keep my writing sacred, because as soon as I start putting pressure on that stuff just to make videos, then this whole thing's going to come unglued. The second thing is, I am a yapper, if you haven't noticed by now, and I want to know how to make long-form videos about books and such interesting and engaging. You know, as much as I'm doing this for myself, as like a public record of what I have read and enjoyed and all those things I described previously, of course, I would like people to watch these videos, and I would like them to enjoy these videos. So figuring out how to strike the balance between length and level of detail and viewer enjoyment is going to be something I think I'm going to have to do a lot of learning about. In conclusion, I am just so excited about this adventure that I'm on with the Tired Book Dad channel. It's the same feeling I get when I'm starting a highly anticipated new book series. You know, what new friends will I make? What opportunities will I uncover? What challenges will I encounter, and how will I overcome those? And so I view this new YouTube channel as an adventure the same way I view, you know, Frodo taking the ring to Mount Doom, although hopefully that's not quite the kind of journey that I'm on here. So that's all for now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll join me on this journey, and I'll have another video up here on the screen at some point soon.